Um, so our next segment, we are going to have Susie Murph hosting us once again with special guest Dave Dickinson, who may have some updates on Betelgeuse.
Yes, I
Um,
do.
okay, I'm going to disappear off screen, get you guys a little bit better formatted. Um, but for now, let's go ahead and get things started.
Well, hey everybody, it's producer Susie. I'm back again. I had my afternoon of playing D&D off, relaxing for a little while during all of this. And I am back here with you tonight with Dave Dickinson, who you may all recognize as being one of the folks from our weekly space hangout that you've seen. And Dave also, every year about this time of year, he does a big guide to what you can see in the sky for the next year. And so we always like to have him come on our various shows and talk about what kinds of things you'll be able to look up and see in the next year. So, Dave, first of all, tell people where they can find you.
Well, I've been writing for Universe Today for I think almost not quite a decade. Back when we used to do the Sunday night virtual star parties is when I started. Actually, I met Jason Major before I started in the Universe Today, and he's like, "Hey, there's this new thing called Google Plus, and everybody's doing." Fraser's over at Universe Today is doing virtual star parties on Sunday nights. So I had my $20 webcam hooked up to my telescope, and I kind of started. I'd been blogging before that, and I do freelance writing. I'm a frequent contributor, Sky and Telescope, Universe Today. We had a book last year that Pamela Gay actually wrote the forward to,
Yes.
Universe Today. And we have another book that I'm working on that's right at the copy editor right now it's going to be a deep sky guide. I've been melting my brain doing these. These are my reference maps for what I'm making. This is going to have tons of sky maps in it, all built to use black stars, white background. You can use it with a red flashlight. This is me and Fraser kind of hatched this idea of having a field guide that is actually not a coffee table book, although there's going to be some eye candy pictures in there, galaxies and stuff too. But this is going to be one you can actually use out in the field. And I hope Betelgeuse doesn't pop its top because the book is at the copy editor and I'll have to change some of the stuff in the book. I have a table in there actually for close nearby top half dozen supernovae candidates in there. And I was using it and referencing it. We were talking about Betelgeuse this weekend. I was like, you know what? I'm going to have to change that table if it disappears. So.
Yeah, well, tell us what you know or have learned about it anyway. We'll get that out of the way here at the beginning.
Okay, well, I saw Friday night going around and I had to do a dive down. I saw everybody on Twitter talking about Betelgeuse, and this is one of the closer stars. It's about 720 light years plus or minus 50. We actually don't have its position pinned down better than that. That is a candidate to be a nearby supernova. Now, and what happened is it dropped in magnitude by about 1 magnitude, which is a change in about 2.5 times in brightness. So that sent me up here to the rooftop. I got to think, you know what, the sky's clear tonight. I'm going to go up there and look myself and see what's going on. And I went up and looked, and I was trying to gauge it against other bright stars in the sky. And I was looking at Aldebaran because that's another orangish star nearby in Taurus. Betelgeuse being in Orion, in the shoulder of Orion. And I'm like, yeah, it is kind of fainter than, noticeably fainter than Aldebaran. So I was like, okay, so I made a quick magnitude guesstimate, and it's like, it's probably plus 1.5 magnitude, which is on the low end, but not out of the ordinary for this star. The star fluctuates, like I said, about 1 magnitude between, it kind of goes between being brighter than Rigel, which is actually Beta Orionis, the second brightest star. Betelgeuse is actually characterized as Alpha Orionis, but usually it's fainter than Rigel, so it kind of goes back and forth between being brighter and fainter. It's one of the constellations where the Alpha star isn't always the brightest. I realized this writing the book when I was looking at Alpha stars. There are some that are actually not the brightest in the constellation that are kind of catalog errors. But so it's interesting. It's lowest drop. I've seen people say that this is the lowest it's been in about 50 years. It's not out of the ordinary that it would do this. It's kind of interesting. I may write about it this week if I have time with everything else and holiday commitments coming up. But I think 2 magnitudes and change either way would be really exciting. Then you would have something. Betelgeuse, of course, may go supernova. Uh, it might go tonight, or it might go 100,000 years from now. If we had it in our lifetime, that would be really exciting, because astronomers would all be scrambling. Every telescope, radio telescope, optical telescope, everything would be focused on that, because we would have the chance to study a Type 2 supernova up close. Now, this isn't close. It's not close enough to be dangerous. It's not in what they call the kill zone.
It's close enough that we get to see it very up close, but not close enough that it's going to cause us any problems.
Yeah, I had this question this weekend quite a bit. That's one of the top questions. 50 light years is usually put down as the kill zones. Hopefully there's no civilizations within 50 light years of Betelgeuse. Maybe SETI might want to look for some distress calls right now. So yeah, it's going to be enough to be interesting. And even things like, it's been pointed out, like LIGO, gravitational wave observatory, may see something off that if it happens. It's still a very big outside of very low probability if. Like I said, I think it'd be cool to see, because the odds against it in our lifetime are actually pretty low. But then after that, Betelgeuse, Orion won't look the same after that. I mean, it'll have a small expanding nebula, but it won't have a bright star in the shoulder anymore. So Orion won't look like the Hunter anymore. So that would be kind of bizarre too.
It will be pretty different, but it will be amazing to have the opportunity to see something like that if we get the chance to. That would be pretty amazing.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll probably be up there looking again as soon as it'd be interesting to see when the light curve starts going back up, and see probably looking at other historic fadings of Betelgeuse. Probably within a week or so, we'll see the light curve going back up. And if it kept going back up into the negative territory, we did a back of the envelope calculation. The supernova, the last close one we saw was in the Large Magellanic Cloud in 1987. That one had a absolute magnitude, trying to think, I think it was in the negative 20s or so. That means absolute magnitude, meaning if you put it 10 parsecs away, how bright would it be? Now, if you put Betelgeuse in that same category, so we did some numbers on it based on that, how close Betelgeuse is, and we figured that Betelgeuse would probably be about negative 10. That would be not quite as bright as a full moon. I think it's negative 14, but it's be bright enough you'd see it in the daytime. And it would cast shadows too.
That's the cool thing, is that it would be visible in the sky clearly as something going on. And that's pretty amazing, because we don't have things like that all the time. So
and Venus is visible naked eye, and that's negative 4.
Right.
The magnitude scale, the lower the number you get, when you go down into the negatives, you're getting pretty bright. Venus is negative 4, so negative 10. The brightest iridium flares were like negative 8, and the magnitude scale is logarithmic, so that's each magnitude change is 2.514, I believe. So the cool thing with magnitudes, when you change 5 magnitudes, you change 100 times in brightness. Wow. So it's kind of easy to, so negative 10 is pretty darn bright. Like I said, that would be, and this would be the time of year for it to go too, because it's opposite to the sun. If Betelgeuse were to go in June or July, the sun would be up in Gemini near the summer solstice, because we just passed the winter solstice today for the northern hemisphere. So I mentioned that before. It's like, that would be just really cosmic bad luck if we had Betelgeuse go in the northern hemisphere summertime. It wouldn't be as prominent to see, because it would be vying with the sun being nearby. Right now in the wintertime would be absolutely the best time for it to go.
We'd get the best view for sure.
Yeah,
that
because
would be
you
amazing.
would see it coming up. Orion is prominent in the wintertime here.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And the seeing is better, the cool air, at least because we're having winter in the northern hemisphere, the seeing is better. And
when you get a cold night in the wintertime, it's actually one of the best nights, because it's the sky's cleared off and the air settles and stuff. I always thought it was a shame. I know it's a struggle to get. I'm always trying to get people on Twitter to go outside, and like when there's an ISS pass or stuff, I notice in the winter there's not the interest as much as in the summertime. But I'm like, it's too bad, because you
can see better.
You have a lot of nighttime too.
Yeah, it's
like night starts like at 5 p.m. instead of like 10 p.m. So you have a long observing night. So if you can bear the cold. And, I lived in Alaska and definitely in the wintertime, the Northern Lights were so awesome up there.
Oh.
I've been out observing and had focusers freeze. Like it's been that cold where I've gone to try to turn the focusing knob and the focuser would freeze up. So.
Well, going somewhere to see the aurora is on my bucket list. I'm not sure if I'll make it to Iceland on one of the trips Fraser takes, but I want to go somewhere because I'm in Atlanta. We don't see those.
Yeah, you don't get them. I'm here in Norfolk.
We don't get them. Yeah. So that would be something. And I like the cold. So yeah, I would go somewhere.
Fairbanks is pretty good because actually the Fairbanks is in that sweet spot about 60 degrees north where the aurora oval actually it's better than at the poles because the poles you do see them, but in an area like Fairbanks, they tend to come right overhead at that sweet spot. And Iceland too, about 60 degrees north. They were so common there that deep sky photographers would consider them a nuisance. I mean, they would wash out if you were trying to like shoot the Orion Nebula or something like that. The auroras would actually wash out your photograph, and it'd be like, it's amazing. Like down here, we would be just amazed if we could see the aurora, even a green glow or something. Like it is really spectacular. I'd put it up there in the top 3 along with like a total solar eclipse and like a really good meteor storm like the Leonids. Northern Lights are really amazing. They're almost eerie to watch.
See, out of all of those, the only one I got to see was the eclipse, the 2017 eclipse.
2017.
Yeah, in Carbondale. We were all there with the Astronomy Cast folks. So that was pretty amazing because we had such a long totality.
You see, I got clouded out at the moment of totality. Me and
Pamela did too.
Yeah, I know.
On the Weather Channel. Yeah.
Yeah. I saw the footage of that. Yeah. I wasn't, I had BBC wanted to interview me, but I told them it's like not during totality because I want to just experience the eclipse. I said I can either do it before or after, but we saw all the partial phases. We were at the Perry Radio Observatory. We got an invite in the Smoky Mountain in North Carolina. Now, just to go somewhere named Smoky Mountains, you're kind of tempting hubris there to, it was such a clear day when it started too. It was clear and blue and the clouds came in about an hour before. And then we started getting nervous and like, well, we're going to make our stand here because this is where we are. We can't go anywhere. So
it's too late to leave.
And we saw, I have a photo timestamped when I saw the clouds and we started seeing the partial eclipse coming in. The clouds were kind of running in front of it and I knew totality was coming. I just took my camera and I actually did what they tell you not to do. I started just shooting at it, but it was filtered through the clouds. So I know it's like, I'll take the risk. I have a photo timestamp about 48 seconds before totality is where we lost it. So, but now it gives me excuse to go to the next one. So.
That works.
Sorry, getting a little noise in the background. I don't know if it's carrying on the feed. But
I think I can hear it a little bit. I think it's Pamela, but
okay. Well, go ahead and tell us then. So we've got Betelgeuse out of the way.
Yeah,
as that would definitely be the big thing.
That would be the big story of
be hard
of
to beat
lifetime.
that.
Yeah, it definitely would. And this year we just had the transit of Mercury. That was kind of interesting.
Right.
I did a public event for that. I wasn't going to do it because I've seen a lot of transits of Mercury. And then I realized it's like, well, this is the next one till 2033, I believe. And that's in Europe. I mean, it's not out of the realm possibility. Life might find me to see the next one in 2033, but I thought this might be my last one actually. So it's like, well, I don't know, because I think 2048 is the next one. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. We'll see. So it's, I did make it. That was probably the top event for this year was that transit. So, I mean, and they're kind of just fun to watch. Mercury kind of just like the black dot go in front of the sun.
Yeah. I remember the transit of Venus. That was the major one. I remember watching
I fought clouds for that one too, but I did see it briefly.
In Atlanta, we have so much light pollution. I never see anything directly. So I just always watch streaming of people doing it. So I get the really good scenes. So tell us what's going to happen in 2020.
Well, coming up, this isn't quite 2020, but in a couple of days, we have an annular solar eclipse over the Indian Ocean that's coming up. Cool. We won't see it here. I know a few people that have already journeyed to Oman, to Saudi. Saudi's actually issuing some special visas for eclipse chasers to go watch the annular there. One part of the United States does see it. The path of annularity goes over the territory of Guam. So they're going to see that. That's the final eclipse of this year. Next year for eclipses is a little more hit and miss. There are several penumbrals. There's 7 eclipses, but there's 3 of them are lunar penumbrals. And that's where the moon passes through the outer part of the shadow and just kind of gets a dim faint kind of shading on it rather than the bite out of it eclipse. So that's kind of almost a non-eclipse event. They're kind of, I watch, one cool thing I like with penumbral eclipses is actually to take a photo before, during, and after, and you can see the shading. You can see that on there. There is a total solar eclipse in, let me consult my book. I can actually give you dates. In this fine tune, which is you can still order on Amazon before Christmas. Amazon Prime will get it to you.
And I have a copy of that. I just didn't bring it in here. I should have, but I have a copy.
When I remembered today, oh yeah, I got to talk about what's going on in 2020. I was like, you know what? I put events in here all the way out to 2024.
See, that was smart.
Yeah, and the reason I did the odd number of years, because we wrote this started from 2019 to 2024, is I wanted to include the April 8th, 2024 total lunar or solar eclipse, the next solar eclipse over the U.S. I said, you know, if we do that, then we can include the Michael Zeiler's fine map that was going to get inverted on there.
That's fantastic.
That he gave us. Yeah, so I was like, we can actually go out. That passes over my hometown of Presque Isle, Maine, too. So that's probably where I'll be for that eclipse. Although that's probably going to be one of the cloudier. Most eclipse chasers already have plans to go to Mexico or down to the southwest,
right,
where it's going to be clear.
And I know for us, it goes right over Carbondale, Illinois again.
Yes,
that right. was a really unusual thing, was that the two major North American eclipses were going over the same city.
Yeah, that little tri-state area actually gets all three, or gets two eclipses within the span of 7 years. So, yeah. So for solar eclipses next year, on January 21st, on the summer solstice, there's actually an annular eclipse, but that's going to be passing over Africa, Southeast Asia, China, and the Pacific. So again, we're going to miss out on that one. And there is also a total solar eclipse on December 14th. Next year. That's going to be the last solar eclipse of next year, and that's going to be over the tip of South America. So again, we're not going to see that one. So 2024 is the next total solar eclipse we're going to see here. I wouldn't mind going down and seeing that one, but probably the biggest event I think next year for astronomy is the Mars is at opposition next year in October. And this is Mars comes in opposition, meaning that it's opposite to the setting sun about every 26 months, roughly every 26 months, and you get a really good Mars observing season. 2018 was pretty good, was one of the best ones, and now we're getting into a cycle where we're moving away from what they call perihelic oppositions, where Mars is slowly going toward apohelic oppositions that aren't quite, but this one's still going to be pretty good. Mars is going to be, I wrote it down, 22 arc seconds across, which is almost as large as it can appear. It won't appear as large as the full moon. Of course, you'll see that email come around like it does every August. Yeah, 22 arc seconds is pretty good size.
That's pretty big.
It's big enough for a small telescope, or so that you'll see some detail. Like usually the first thing you can see in a telescope, I tell people, is you can see the polar caps, like as a little white smudge on the limb is usually the first detail. And Mars rotates a little longer than Earth, once every 24 hours and 30 minutes, meaning that when you're looking at Mars from one evening to the next, you're seeing almost the same longitude, just slightly rotated. So you can actually, over the span of a week or so near opposition, you can start to see different detail on the surface. So,
that's cool.
And that means it's going to be a big Mars launch year too. I write a lot about space flight for Sky and Telescope. So I have an article coming out next week on all the top space missions. And there are 4 countries right now that want to send missions out to Mars. I don't know if they're all going to go. Usually it goes, like in the 2018 season, there was all these missions that were going to go, and Mars Insight ended up being the only one that actually went. So space flight is hard, and missions get bumped back. The Mars 2020 rover's going in July. The launch window is in July for next year to make it to Mars. So Mars 2020 rover. The European Space Agency's recently named Rosalind Franklin ExoMars rover. That is having issues right now. I just read an article a few days ago that they're giving it about a 50-50 chance. It's having funding issues, and they had problems with one of the parachutes on the test that they're asking JPL to take a look at, because their Schiaparelli test lander that they tried a few years ago in 2016. Yeah, that one failed on descent. So, and that was just a test demonstrator and lander. So that was, but obviously they want to take that kind of lessons learned forward, and the ExoMars rover, they don't want that to crash. So,
right, because Mars has a history of eating things that we try to send there.
It does. The Russians have like, I think it's 14 missions. They've never successfully landed, unless you count. Some people say, well, Mars 3, it returned data for like 30 seconds before it fell silent. And it was like a really static, blurry image. So some people consider that was a semi-successful landing.
And it was like about half of NASA missions were successful, or it's improved now, I think.
NASA's done really well. I think the only one they lost was Mars Polar Lander was the only, as far as landing on Mars, NASA's had a really good track record. Mars 2020, the rover, of course, is going to land like the Curiosity did. It's going to do a skyhook landing, which I thought was really, the very first time I saw that skyhook landing, I was like, that looks like it has a lot of moving pieces in it. So it kind of made me, but they did it. I think it's cool.
Really 7 minutes of terror.
Yeah.
Yes, because you're looking at all of the complicated things that it had to do. And it's like, I remember sitting there going, that looks unnecessarily complicated.
Yeah.
With too many places where it'll go wrong.
From an engineering standpoint, the more complexity you add in, the more things that can break.
Yes.
But it was like, I was amazed that they did it. So now they're going to try to do it again in the European, or the UAE, United Arab Emirates. They want to send an orbiter. That's going to land. That's going to launch on a H2A. JAXA is going to launch that one. That surprised me when I looked it up.
Oh, that's an interesting combination.
I assumed it was probably going to launch on a Soyuz. But then when I looked into it a little deeper, it's like, oh, they're actually Japanese space agency is going to launch that one. So that will be a first for UAE. And China wants to launch an orbiter and lander to Mars as well. So we'll see if these missions, I'm pretty certain Mars 2020 will try to go. So at least that one will go.
So are all of these other ones, will they have probably launch windows in the summer, in July? About the same time?
July is going to be all Mars all the time, basically.
Okay.
So, for space flight. So.
Well, we like simulcasting launches, so especially that JAXA one with the UAE, that will be interesting.
I'm watching everyone that broadcasts, so I'm always like watching them and I usually put out sighting opportunities too for things that are in orbit, because that's actually a fascinating part of amateur astronomy and just because satellite stuff. And speaking of which, we have another Starlink launch coming up from Elon Musk as well in SpaceX. At the end, they're going to do another batch of 60 satellites, I believe it's December 30th or New Year's Eve that they're doing. And next year, they're going to do a lot of launches. So this is going to be an issue that's already coming up about how crowded the night sky is going to become with these.
How crowded it is and how much they're interfering with observing. And so it's a whole can of worms.
When they did that first launch earlier this year and they did the 60 satellites, I spent most of that weekend doing predictions for everyone to see them via Twitter, because we had some ad hoc elements that were put out there. Dr. Marco Langbroek actually does a lot for satellite tracking. He put some stuff out there. So we started plugging these into a program called Orbitron and just giving screenshots. Like people are saying like, hey, I'm in Christchurch, I'm in London, it's like, okay, it's like, you should see it at this certain time. I saw them a few days later. The second launch, I actually saw it after a few orbits, came over Norfolk, and I'd seen some other satellite deployments like the early Iridiums when they'd come over Alaska, and you'd see a string of satellites after. This was pretty incredible. I followed it with binoculars. So I'm kind of like, in one way I'm just chronicling and tracking this and telling people, and I know there's a lot of controversy out there as far as what this is going to do to the night sky.
Right.
So it's, in OneWeb is another company, they're going to be launching batch satellites next year too. Other companies are getting into this game. So it's going to be another interesting player. We may have in order of 1,000 extra satellites by the end of next year between those two companies alone. So it's going to be a interesting time. So, but on the other hand, I think about, if this does bring, if I can travel out to the deserts in Morocco and be able to use the web and stuff because of this, if this is going to be, I don't know if this is going to be a game changer really, or, they thought the Iridiums were going to be a game changer too. And they ended up kind of, satellite phones became a niche application. Like, if you were on Mount Everest, maybe you used the satellite phone.
Right.
But the
military applications, things like that.
So
yeah.
I wonder if, I'm kind of on the fence to see if Starlink is really going to be something that, if you're out in Namibia, will you be using it to do like Zoom meetings and Hangouts and stuff? Or is it going to be something that is just going to end up being a niche application thing that's like, well, certain, like the military or people in rescue operations use it, but it's not a day-to-day. I don't know.
We'll see.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll figure out fairly quickly if it's going to be a problem, and hopefully Musk will respond as he says he will, as far as like making up for observation problems and stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting time for amateurs in satellite spotting and tracking and stuff. So another interesting thing coming up next year, and I was looking at this, it's like, I didn't realize this is this rare. There is a close conjunction next year about this time on, I believe it's December 22nd next year, at the very end of the year, of Jupiter and Saturn. They're going to be only 6 arc minutes apart. 6 arc minutes is like 1/5 the size of the full moon.
And right after the solstice, so you get a beautiful dark night,
they're going
long
to be
night for it.
They're going to be in the evening, December 21st, right on the solstice. That was one day off. 30 degrees east of the sun, so they're going to be in the dusk sky. So you're going to have both gas giants paired together. It means you'll be able to put them in one telescopic field of view.
That'll be beautiful.
That's going to be the closest planet-planet conjunction, and that's probably going to be a big deal. And I wondered how rare, when's the last time we've had one that's closer? So I started running a program called Occult that actually looks back through, I could sift through like occultations for thousands of years in close conjunctions and things like that. And this is going to be the closest one since 1623 for Saturn and Jupiter. And you have to go, there's one not too much further ahead. Of course, we won't probably make it. 2080, there's another close one that's closer than 6 arc minutes apart. So that's pretty rare as far as seeing. I always think it's just cool to show people both in the same eyepiece. And we've had that before. We have both planets really in the same eyepiece. That's always a neat one to show people. Comets next year seem kind of, I just wrote an article for Universe Today. There's a handful of binocular comets. There's one called 2017 T2 Pan-STARRS, discovered in 2017, should reach 8th magnitude, plus 8th magnitude on May 6th when it's near perihelion. Plus 8th magnitude puts it in binocular range. So not quite naked eye, look like a little fuzzball. It's in Ursa Major, so it's going to be a circumpolar comet, like it'll be up all night. So that's probably the biggest draw for comets. Now the thing is, comets, you can always get a bright one at any time. We haven't had a good bright northern hemisphere comet. Really, you have to go all the way back to Hale-Bopp and Hyakutake back in the 90s, which were pretty amazing. I mean, it's amazing to think that the internet was a baby. We all weren't blogging or Zoom meeting or doing tweeting or anything. There wasn't even really digital astrophotography.
Right.
More people were doing, some people, digital astrophotography was very niche in the late 90s. It was just starting to come on. Most of us were still shooting on film. So it's amazing to think we haven't had a bright comet since then, Northern Hemisphere. They had a few, W3 Lovejoy, that went to the Southern Hemisphere. That was the one 2011, went past perihelion, and we were all watching online. We're like, it's going to burn up. It's going to burn up. And it actually made it around.
And it made it around.
But then it went to the Southern Hemisphere sky, so it was like we didn't see it. And then there was one of the Lovejoy comets, I believe 2007. That was the Southern Hemisphere. Terry Lovejoy, very prolific amateur astronomer, comet discoverer. I think he's found 7 or 8 comets.
Wow.
And it's hard for amateurs to find comets now because all the like Pan-STARRS and all these big surveys, they're going to such faint magnitudes that we have a lot of robotic competition out there now that are finding more comets. Are getting named Pan-STARRS than anything. And then we have LSSTs coming online. That will be another big, probably we'll find a lot more comets named LSST. I think 2022 that comes online. Got some really big telescopes coming online. That's going to be really, I saw the LSST mirror at the University of Arizona 2015. They had it in the mirror lab there. That was kind of nifty to see.
It is amazing to see those giant mirrors.
Yeah.
And And just to imagine them out there doing that work. Yeah, it's going to be hard for individual comet hunters
More
to find something.
People will probably find things online, though. I mean, there's always people sifting through. People find comets in the SOHO data looking at the sun because they see these little sun grazers. So more and more people, a lot of astronomy will probably move online, that kind of stuff, because there's just all this data out there. And a lot of times LSST and Pan-STARRS, they may not be looking for comets in the first place, but people will sift through the data and just find this kind of stuff. So that's probably in the next decade. I don't know. The argument now is, does the next decade begin on 2020 or is that the last year? I kind of fall in the camp that 2020 is our final year of the decade, but I know I'm probably in the minority there. So everybody likes to see the numbers. It's like with 2000.
They like to see the numbers change, but I think it's the one. I think the one is the beginning. But
it is. There was a Farmer's Almanac article recently that made a pretty good argument for this 2020 is the final year of the decade.
Right.
I know it's really nerdy and pedantic to just like argue about these things, but I've seen more news articles than anything say that this is the beginning of the next decade. So I think that's where culturally everything is gone.
Right.
But no, it's another thing that's interesting happening, and it's kind of in 2019, this should go on in 2020, is actually it's a non-event, but it's interesting in that the sun is at a curious minimum right now. 2019 has already been it is already on track for being the most spotless year that we've had since we've been observing the sun, really, for quite some, I'd say in the last century or so.
Wow.
Because it's been spotless about 75% of the time, the earthward face of it. So it's been curiously, we're at the end of solar cycle 24. 25 is kind of just getting to a sputtering start. And there's a lot of discussion out there why the solar minimum has just been,
it's been a real minimum.
And this will probably go 2020 may break that. So I've talked to some solar heliophysicists when I've written about this that think solar cycle 25 may almost be absent altogether. And there's some discussion that in addition to the 11-year cycle the sun goes through, there may be larger cycles out there that we just haven't seen because they go over the span of a century or several centuries. Our sun's only mildly variable. It's actually pretty stable. But so it's interesting to see where this is going to go in 2020 if we're going to see. It's too bad because when I do solar events like I did the transit of Mercury, it's always nice to have. I have a little PST scope that does hydrogen alpha where you can see the chromosphere and you see the little. I had that at the eclipse in 2017 too. It's good to have something to show people, like the little prominences and sunspots and things like that. When it's blank, it's like, well, it's just
because it kind of looks freckled. Yeah,
it gives you something else to discuss. Otherwise, it just looks like a big red ball. You're like, okay, it's a red meatball and there's a little dot of mercury on it. So that's what we had for this past one. We had no sunspots. 2016, I think we had a small sunspot when we had the transit. I was in Spain for that one. All I didn't have my PST, but I had a pair of binoculars and I was projecting it back onto a piece of paper. That's how we watched the 2016. That's how I showed it to people over there. So
yeah.
You have to be careful projecting too, because you don't want to burn your paper.
Yes.
You also don't want to, me and Fraser discussed this too, for if you're projecting the sun onto something, you don't want the heat to build up and it can cause optics. Optics usually have coatings and the elements are kind of like, there's some kind of like epoxy or glue that holds the elements together. If it overheats, they can actually come apart or your coatings can become scorched. It can damage telescopes. I've even heard of someone once that left his Dobsonian out on the porch and the sun had come through, just happened to come through, shine through it. It actually set part of his deck on fire because
no.
Yeah, there was actually a documented case of that. But
because it focuses that light. So
just for when it passed through.
Be careful.
But, so be careful out there, not only with solar, with the usual eye safety, like say with the annular eclipse coming up this week, you'll have to use solar glasses the entire time through, because even though an annular eclipse cuts the sunlight down to like 1%, that 1% is still really bright.
Yeah, it still has a good amount and will definitely damage you. So don't go out and look at the sun without proper protection and equipment.
They were pretty good in the 2017 eclipse leading up to it. The discussion online was all pretty good. as far as getting, although there were people actually selling counterfeit glasses that weren't like safety approved. And it was an interesting time. That will probably come around again in 2024, the whole discussion. But I thought, because sometimes some places what will happen is the local media will actually scare people into not watching the eclipse. And we didn't want that to happen, because people will start thinking that it's innately dangerous to be out during an eclipse. They'll kind of get a lot of misinformation out there.
Right.
So it's like, so you want to balance it with, no, this is really cool, you need to go out and see it, with take the proper safety precautions. So
right. And thankfully, doing something like watching an eclipse it's not so hard to project the image, like you said, on something, and you can use, cardboard, all kinds of stuff. So it's not prohibitively expensive to have something to go and use that for.
Yeah, that's the very simplest way to watch a solar eclipse, is just project it with something back onto it. Or you watch them online, but I like to watch them in person if I can. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the 2024. I know people already that have plans for where they're going to be. So we'll see. 2017, I didn't really know until a few weeks prior or so that I got that media invite, and I knew it was kind of a crapshoot, like I said, to go into the Smoky Mountains on an August afternoon, that we were about 50-50 we would see it. So and what was really heartbreaking too is because we were in Asheville, and I was looking every evening at that same time in the afternoon. It was clear every evening at that same time a week prior, until that very, so it's like, okay, we look like we might have a good chance, because you don't need a perfectly clear sky, you just need to see the sun. So as long as you can see the sun through the clouds, you've seen the eclipse. One thing I did see that was interesting on the 2017 eclipse was that I've never seen before, was seeing the partially eclipsed sun through thin clouds. It was enough that you didn't need protection. You could look up and see the crescent of the sun. Yeah, so I guess you can think back before they had telescopes or anything, they probably could see a partial phase, because if you're out in a clear blue day and it's a partial eclipse, you really wouldn't notice it unless you look close at things like gaps, shadow gaps in the tree leaves would cast little crescents on the ground or things like that. But you wouldn't go out and say, hey, it's 50% darker, because your eyes adjust and you don't really notice. So you got to thinking back, they probably, in the time of the Greeks or the Romans, if they'd seen, looked up and saw, they could probably see the same thing and say something interesting is going on.
I know when we were at the event where we saw the eclipse, I happened to have been inside a building for a while and came out after it had already started getting darker out.
Yeah.
And I remember I was able to notice it, but that was simply because I was walking out. And it was like, oh, wait, the sky looks different. That is unusual. But yeah.
We did see from Perry, we saw the 360-degree sunset kind of, where, because below the cloud deck, it did get dark even with the clouds. And I noticed the mosquitoes came out. It tricked.
It tricked them into coming out. It was very hot and there were a lot of mosquitoes.
Yeah, because it was August, and they said, it's always one thing to watch, like what it does for wildlife and local. I noticed kind of a light wind came up, and the one thing I noticed is suddenly everybody started swatting mosquitoes just out of it fooled them enough to come out just for a little bit. But no, it was kind of interesting. It was interesting, just all the excitement leading up to it too, and following what was going on. It seemed like everybody that was interested in space at all crowded into that path of totality just for like one afternoon.
Yeah, they kind of all got into that strip and were doing stuff.
Because just watching everybody, I'm most active on Twitter, and just watching everybody on Twitter, I was like, wow, it seems like everybody in my Twitter feed apparently is just along the path of totality right now. So it was very intriguing to watch that whole effect. So
that was cool. So so what else do we have?
Let's see. As far as next year, meteor showers, we have the Perseids, of course, that the moon is favorable for those. We always have the quadrantids that come. They're coming right around January 2nd. And that's kind of a hit or miss shower. It's a good shower. It's intense, usually about 100 meteors per hour, which is decent. However, they have a very narrow peak. So it's like either you're going to see them or you're not, because some showers like the Geminids we just passed by, their peak is several days long. So most of the entire world sees them as they come by. The quadrantids have a very narrow peak of about 10 hours. So those are coming right up. Probably the best next year is going to be the Perseids, of course. Those come around August 12th, and they usually are about 100, 120 per hour.
Right.
The moon phase for next year is 40% waning crescent, which is pretty good, actually, because the moon phase is usually the biggest factor as far as whether you're going to see meteors or not. Because if it happens like with the Geminids last week with the full moon, that really cuts down how much illumination that the brighter illumination the full moon is going to cut down how many meteors you're going to see. The Geminids next year are much better. I think the moon is very close to new. Oh yeah, it's actually right on new moon next year for the Geminids, December 14th. So that should be a good year for them. Interesting fact, I only found this out a few years ago. The Perseids, the Leonids, the Orionids, and the Geminids, those big four meteor showers that are in the fall to winter, they're spaced in such a way, this is just coincidence, but roughly the period of lunation, which was the moon's phase from new to new, the synodic phase, 29.5 days, they're roughly dividable. All this means that if it's a good Perseid year, it's usually a good Geminid year as well. I didn't realize till I started looking into it. It's like, that is true.
There's a pattern.
They're kind of spaced out, because I was like, yeah, it does seem like that, doesn't it? It's like this year, the Perseids, the moon wasn't that great. And the Geminids, it was near full too. Usually it just falls, it just happens to be the way those major showers are spaced on the calendar. It's like, yeah, that is true. But so next year should be the Geminids seem to be getting better the last few years. There's a lot of discussion about whether this stream is evolving, because it's a very new stream. Right. You don't see, it wasn't even discovered till the 1860s. So that's like a little over 150 years ago. So this stream seems to be one that's meteor streams. There used to be one back in the 19th century called the Andromedids that used to do outbursts in December. That stream seems to have moved. What's happening is Jupiter's gravity is it's taking and modifying. Jupiter's the largest planet out there. So for the most part, it's influencing the meteor streams. So we're kind of into these streams of dust particles laid down by comets, or in the case of Geminids, asteroid rock comet 32 Phaethon is the source for the Geminids. It seems like it's actually we're moving into some of the streams of that particular meteor shower, and they're getting better right now. So through the 21st century. So, and the Leonids should be getting better. We're over halfway. The Leonids peak every 33 years.
Oh, okay, yeah.
They're coming up probably 2030, 2031. We should start seeing a ramp up. Back in the late 90s, we saw a ramp up to the 1999. I saw the Leonids from Kuwait in the desert. I was in the Air Force at the time in 1998, and that was probably one of the most amazing meteor showers I'd seen. We were definitely in storm territory, out toward like 1,000 meteors per hour, I would estimate, towards sunrise.
Probably really good dark skies there too.
It was, and the thing that a lot of people don't realize with military bases at forward operating locations, just for operational purposes, they're usually blacked out. So they don't have all the big spotlights that you have at a stateside military base. So we went right out behind our tent city and just laid out in cots and watched for several hours. So, it's I've heard people that have deployed, friends over to Afghanistan, and that they've remarked that said they've never really seen the night sky till some of those bases, because they operate just with night vision goggles blacked out at night. So
you really don't have any light pollution at that point.
There's some really pristine dark skies.
Pure dark sky. Yeah.
The 98 Leonids is still, like I said, one of the most amazing things I had seen. That literally you were seeing a meteor every few seconds. So my very unofficial estimate for the zenithal hourly rate, I always say we were knocking on probably, if you're doing 1,000 meteors per hour, that's about there's 3,600 seconds in an hour. You're doing one every few seconds. So that's about what I would say we were seeing. So no, that's pretty incredible. So we'll see what they do in 2030s. Usually the Leonids only do 20 to 30 meteors per hour. Nothing really remarkable. Well, there's one other event that's kind of interesting.
Okay.
The moon will occult Mars. In other words, it will pass in front of it on February 18th when it's a waxing crescent. And this is actually visible from North America, I believe from the Southwest. at dawn. I think it's going to be daytime here. I looked
cool.
at this event. So folks down toward like Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, it's kind of nifty. You'll actually see the moon pass in front of a bright planet right before sunrise. It's a very photogenic event. Of course, when the moon's waning, the illuminated part is moving forward. So you're going to see the bright part of the moon go over Mars. And then I always think it's kind of cooler when it's waxing, because then you get the dark limb, you get the star of the planet pass in behind.
And it just goes black. In front of it. Yeah.
Those are always kind of nifty. They make good little animated GIFs too. I've done video, and you can just do it blacks out. With the planet though, it kind of goes behind like slowly, but that's going to be, it's cool that we usually get a few planetary occultations by the moon per year, but they happen somewhere like Antarctica or somewhere where there's no people. So,
somewhere it's harder to get video from.
So that
images.
That one's positioned well for North American observers. So that'll kind of be a nifty little event there. I would put that in the top 10 for next year, definitely.
So what do you think would be, for amateur astronomers, what do you think would be the easiest thing for people to go out and see this year that should be something that, you have a good chance of seeing? The meteor showers, something like that?
Meteor showers, yeah, you really don't need it. I mean, you can do photography during a meteor shower, but you really don't need any kind of equipment other than a working pair of, I call Mark 1 eyeballs that just go out and sit and watch. So meteor showers, definitely. I have telescopes, and I've used and built telescopes, but I use more than anything. Of course, these aren't your usual off-the-shelf binoculars, but I'm usually using these. But these are image stabilized, which are a little expensive. But I used a pair of 7x50 hunting binoculars for years for observing, and that really. I've got an article coming out on EOS magazine. As a matter of fact, they wanted me to do one on binocular astronomy. And it's like, you really can. They were amazed that I was saying, that you could see the rings of Saturn with binoculars. I said, well, if you can get something up to about 20 power or so, which some of the larger binoculars, even with these are 15 power, I can see little stubby kind of handles on Saturn. Saturn's rings are tipped open right now. So not quite the entire rings, but you can definitely see about what Galileo saw, that there was something up with so it was interesting to look at Galileo's sketches, because he couldn't quite discern. He knew something was odd with Saturn, but he couldn't quite discern. It wasn't until Christian Huygens that he figured out, no, it's actually a flat disk around the planet.
Right.
In Galileo's drawings, it looked like maybe a double-handled coffee cup or something, which you got to think really kind of like, to him must have been really kind of like, he didn't even know what he was looking at.
Right.
Like, how bizarre is this?
But it was enough for him to go, there's something strange about that thing in the sky.
Yeah. And he
doesn't look like the other things in the sky.
I always like to say he was really the first publish or perish scientist. That he didn't, Galileo didn't invent the telescope. Telescopes were around, and he probably wasn't even the first person to look at the night sky with it, because there's evidence that I forget his name. There was a British astronomer who had sketched things like the moon, but Galileo really promoted and published and put out there. I think that's what set him apart, and really kind of interpreted and tried to put some kind of understanding behind what he projected and observed sunspots and sketched things on the moon, and realized, looking at the Milky Way, that he's like, there are more stars than you can see out there when you're looking at the plane of the galaxy, because they thought at the time what you saw with the naked eye was what there was. I mean, why wouldn't you think that until you realize that, looking a little further, there's more stars you just can't see with the naked eye that are invisible stars. Curiously, he almost could have discovered Neptune. There was a close conjunction. He actually sketched it in one of his notebooks, passing Jupiter. When it was nearby, he sketched it as an unknown star. There was a historian that sleuthed this out a few years ago that looked at it and looked at Galileo's notebooks, and they ran the simulations. And they were like, no, he sketched Neptune in there. But again, they didn't think there were more planets than there were, because you thought, well, why would there be? Until William Herschel found Uranus, there was no inkling that there should be. They weren't looking for new planets because they thought there shouldn't be any. So, but it's amazing to think, it's like, darn, he totally could have discovered Neptune.
Well, it kind of reminds me of the time, I believe we were having a star party online, and there was the little the supernova, I think, that was in there, and everybody's looking at it. Nobody saw it.
M80, I think it was M81. It was either M81, M82.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was. I
It
was
was
in on
there.
that. I was in on that. I wrote about that incident in this book, just
Yes.
to kind of illustrating. It's like I was doing the moon, so I was showing people the moon, and I remember them talking about when they were observing that, and then it's like I kicked myself after that. Day later, I was like, darn, had I had my head turned looking at it, I might have noticed that. It's like, hey, there's a bright star in front of that. It started looking at different. If you look at images online, maybe on Wikipedia, you could be like, okay, compare that to what we're seeing, and that
Right.
bright star is not normally there. We totally could have discovered that supernova during the virtual. That was early in January too. I remember it was
Yeah.
right after New Year's when that happened.
And I remember because I was watching the stream, handling stuff behind the scenes, and we're looking at all these images and stuff. And then I think it was the next day, maybe Fraser came in and went, "Was there that in the it?" And he went back and he looked, and it was there. It was just nobody had noticed it. And so if we had noticed it, the virtual star party could have gotten credit for discovering it.
I forget who was doing the narration, but he actually said during the narration, if you watch the video, he's like, well, this galaxy is really not a large producer of supernovae.
Right.
While he was hit. So at least I didn't say that. I was like, I really would have kicked myself.
That doesn't mean none. That just means not very many. And
he's not technically wrong.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I mean, this is just why when you're observing, you have to be paying attention. And then often things don't get seen until you go back and look at it later.
Yeah. I brought that up when we started doing the virtual star party. I was like, we could catch an impact on Jupiter we're running video on it. So amateurs have caught impact flashes on Jupiter. We could be looking at, Comet Hale-Bopp was discovered. I think it was Alan Hale was actually looking at Messier 8, and he's like, hey, there's a little fuzzy patch. And he wasn't hunting for the comet. He just happened to notice there was a fuzzy patch near the nebula at the time, and had the presence of mind to put out an alert out there saying, hey, there's, so those kind of surreptitious discoveries just kind of happen sometimes, even today. So,
and it's really need to be able to be out and be an amateur, like the majority of us out here are, and realize you can spot something just as well as as the professionals if you're in there and you're paying attention and you're taking notes and comparing things. You can find a lot of stuff.
I'm interested to see these automated scopes that are starting to come online. Fraser has one. I forget what they're called, but where you can control it with your smartphone, and it does. It doesn't have an eyepiece per se. It's an electronic sensor that sends it to your phone. And I'm on the fence about. I think they're kind of neat. The ones I looked at were kind of prohibitively expensive, I think, for entry level. Like the $4,000 or $5,000 range. But if it gets people into amateur astronomy, I guess with the tech crowd, I guess that's I'd like to see one up close and actually see it in operation before I make up my mind about. It's a nifty idea.
It is a pretty nifty idea. There was something else I was going to ask you about, and now I'm trying to remember what it was. Any other topics that you want to highlight, because we've got a good 5 minutes left, and so far I'm not seeing very many questions in the chat, so we can go to other stories, because we already hit Betelgeuse. Are there other stories that are related to that aren't necessarily things to watch in our night sky, but things that you think are really cool?
Let's see. Well, we talked about solar activity. Yeah, I jotted down a quick list earlier today too.
You're good with the lists. I always like that.
There's a lot of lists in these.
Yes.
In the next book too, I'm shooting out things, like I said, like the closest nearby supernovae, all the alpha stars per constellation. It's an interesting little, I learned stuff when I write these kind of things too. The top comets for the last century, I compiled all that together. And I think it's neat to have that all in one category, so you can just see everything. One that was fascinating to do. I like doing double stars and variable stars is kind of one thing I like, because double stars, when you're doing a star party, I can still show people things like Albireo or Mizar and Alcor, even I generally end up doing a star party from a really light polluted place. That just seems to be where they like to do them. So you don't get to go to
it's where you have people.
Yeah. I mean, I've done one. I used to do the Necronomicon in, it was a little con convention down in Tampa, St. Pete when I lived there. Generally, it was right in downtown Tampa outside of the hotel. So there'd be me and one other scope operator. And if we had, I remember one time we had the moon and Jupiter. So it's like, okay, I'll show Jupiter and you show the moon. And that's really all because that's all you could see. But double stars sometimes, and I used to work at the Flandreau doing public outreach, the Flandreau Observatory in Tucson. Double stars still have that kind of punch through that you can kind of, even from an urban area, if you know where they are. So I made a good table in this upcoming book of all the best double stars by constellation. My criterion in thinking was stars where both companions are brighter than 10th magnitude. So we're not talking faint double stars, bright double stars, and all of them have a separation of at least 1 arc second or more. Because if you get under an arc second, then you're getting into really hard to resolve territory. Yeah. I mean, unless you got a big telescope and you're a really seasoned professional observer. So there's, there's like, there's Gamma Eritus is a good one. I know in the constellation Aries. There's Algeba in the constellation Leo. There's another good one. Parima and so I made a whole list of these and tabled these out. So it's hopefully in this, what I'm doing with this guidebook for the next one is we go and we do month by month, like Northern and Southern Hemisphere. And now on these, it's going to reference, we have 20 sky maps. So right on the meridian, you can say, well, the whole idea with Fraser's like, we want something, what can I see tonight? So if you look at December, Northern Hemisphere, and you're like, hey, that chart 13 is on the, so this is going to have like, it's going to accompany every graphic. And this really pushed my limited, I'm totally self-educated as far as doing Adobe Illustrator and those kind of things. It totally pushed those skills to, I'm hoping when they publish it, of course, the publisher, you kind of go back and forth on things, that they can put it spiral bound. This is what I'm showing people at amateur star parties. It's like, and mostly I show people these kind of things where you have the text and the map to go with it. And I'm showing these to people at star parties. I'm trying to get feedback as an observer, what do you see that's, mostly I'm interested in what do you see wrong with this? So, because sometimes it's like, I might not see the forest through the trees and just like, think, it's like, it's really hard to get that kind of critical feedback from people. And on Twitter, I've shot some of it out too, and I've shown people so it's, but it's been a fun process, and hopefully it should be out July next year. It should be something a little different
that is awesome
to do. So.
And it's always good to have beta users kind of making sure that what you think is a useful product is actually a useful product there. That if someone wants to flip it open and look at it, does it make sense the way it's laid out? All of that stuff. Yeah.
It's hard. It's like creating anything. It's harder to fight for feedback than most people realize, whether it's a book or you're writing, a novel, or it's just the problem most creative types have is just to get, because anybody will take your book and say, oh yeah, that looks good. Here's an Instagram photo, click, but to have them actually pick it apart and give you here's a real critical feedback, because that takes actual work. So
that is harder.
But it's harder to get, but it's a fun process. So
we do have one question from the chat in here. Larry Weird asks, had you seen the paper on the 100 stars that disappeared?
100 stars that disappeared.
I'm not familiar with that.
I am not familiar with that at all. I don't know if I see a lot of stuff on Astro PH that I'm usually combing through as far as astrophysics stuff that's out there. I hadn't seen anything like that. And of course, more and more, I hear about things first on Twitter these days. That's where I heard about, because mostly I'm following professional amateur astronomers. So when I see them start talking about, I see something like discussion on Betelgeuse more than 3 times on Friday night. So I'm like, okay, what's going on?
Then it kind of rings a bell and you're like, okay, there's something to this. Exactly.
Yeah. And there was an Astro PH paper back there. And usually what I'm the first place I went to look, but of course they're on holiday break. It went, it's kind of an interesting time for this to happen.
Yes.
Is the American,
should be a slow news time.
The American Association of Variable Star Observers is the AAVSO, is the clearinghouse for variable star astronomy. So I thought if there's anything going on with Betelgeuse, that they would be all over it. They've been kind of quiet this weekend. Again, a fluctuation of 1 magnitude isn't out of the norm. So 2 magnitudes would make it really exciting. But I haven't seen anything. They haven't issued an alert notice or bulletin. That might change tomorrow. But
Right.
So for now, it's kind of it's interesting. Let's wait and see. Like I said, it made me go to the roof Friday night. It occurred to me. I was like, Betelgeuse is up right now. I'm going to go up and look at it. So
go up and take a look and see what you can see yourself. Exactly.
Here in downtown Norfolk, I kind of have a curious place to observe. I actually go to the top. We're in an apartment in downtown, which is fairly light polluted. The parking garage roof is one that's just open to the sky. So I just take my telescope up there in the elevator and set up there. So we actually saw the Starliner launch Friday morning.
Yes.
It came up the Virginia coast here. And I knew we kind of had a good shot. So I tweeted out and said, if you're up Friday morning, you might on the East Coast, you might want to go out and look, because you may be able to see it. That's the first time I've seen a Cape launch from this far north. I knew they were possible, but we see Wallops launches here all the time.
Yeah, I heard. Nighttime. I don't remember if it was you. It must have been someone else on Twitter was saying, because they were in Virginia and they were seeing launches from the Cape. So they're like, when the conditions are right, you can see.
Well, what's cool with those ones going to the International Space Station, they have to match that high inclination 52-degree orbit. So they tend to go straight up.
That's what I was going to ask you about.
The space shuttle used to do that when it was going to the International Space Station too, and that was quite dramatic. I lived in Florida at the time, but you could see from Tampa 100 miles away, if the U.S. East Coast gets the good dawn launches, and the West Coast gets the good dusk launches. So when they go out of Vandenberg at dusk, that's when you hear about them having traffic accidents, because everybody's trying to photograph when they do a SpaceX launch. I've seen some pretty amazing video actually, where people actually did end up getting into some minor traffic accidents because they were surprised they saw the SpaceX launch and they were all jumping out trying to photograph it.
Yeah, they were out looking at it, and unfortunately we were there a week ago to try to see some launches, and they moved them all on us. So
that happens too. I used to live in Florida, and I'd try to go over to see launches, and they would shuffle them around sometimes, which is, it was a day trip for me. So some people that come from much further than that, it's a little more difficult.
Right. We went down for a week. Yeah. So we were supposed to have the SpaceX launch and then the Starliner test, and everything moved.
They're going to start sending crew. Starliner, of course, they're probably not going to send crew on the next one now that this one didn't make it.
Yeah, it didn't do what it was supposed to.
So, but they still, Starliner still wants to send crew next year, as does Crew Dragon. Elon Musk's Crew Dragon should be sending crew next year too. So that's going to happen. I mean, we haven't launched crew from the United States since STS-135 2011. So it's been a while. So they've all been getting up there via Soyuz. So,
well, that is fascinating, and I could keep you talking on this for quite a while. Because there is so much to talk about. But our time is up, and it is time for me to turn it back over to Pamela. So thank you so much for being on, Dave.
Yeah, thank you.
Hold your book up again. And everybody, if you don't have a copy of this, you should definitely go get it.
Book.
Yes.
Oh, and I want to thank Pamela for writing the foreword. I don't think I ever did. So
yes.
I am actually, so the foreword, I've written book forwards before. What got me excited is you have a photograph of a solar funnel that I made.
Yes, you have a photograph in there too.
And
really
so
cool.
It's the silly things that make me excited. And I built a solar funnel.
Yeah, they wanted me to do 2 projects for every chapter. That was actually the only project that I had never done. I'd never built one, so I had no photographs of it. So so you ended up with the photograph for that one. So
my pleasure.
And thank you once again for being on here. And folks, you can find him. He shows up on our weekly space hangout. His articles are on Universe Today. Look him up. Dave does great work, and now you'll know what to see next year. All right, Pamela, are you ready to take it back?
I believe that I am. So we are having systematic calamity of guest after systematic calamity of guest. We have had one guest who had to take her significant other to urgent care, and we now have a second one who herself got ill, and the graduate student that is around most often here has gotten sick. So, folks, remember to like soap and water, all the things. Soap and water, all the things.
You don't want to get sick.
No.
It's terrible.
And what's kind of amazing is we traveled and neither Annie, you, nor I got sick despite encountering all the humans. So, yay, team.
So we didn't get launches, but we didn't get sick.
And we did get Disney.
Kind of a balance. Yes, we did. So we
I think
fun.
the Disney, and we just got something, and it's a donation of an amount I can't read because it's a
$30.25.
What does that make the total? That makes the total a palindrome. And dear soul, I love you, but I'm about to ruin that because I have to sync the bits.
Well, thank you for the palindrome. Thank you for the donation. Let me look over and see who that was. That was DPI 209. Thank you.
DPI, don't hate me. I'm syncing the bits.
So, if y'all want to see it as a palindrome again, you have to donate more. So
right.
You can keep doing that all day long.
It looks like $4 in the right amount of change will do it.
Yep.
So you can palindrome it for $4 and math the correct amount of change, people. Math the correct amount of change. Be the change you wish to see in the palindrome.
I think we're all getting a little silly now.
So thank you, Susie, so much for stepping in, letting us have a break on this end. We just demolished pizzas, and Eddie is oh my! I'm gonna steal the camera for a moment and let you see what is occurring because this is adorable. And I'm gonna step on Malachi. So.
Aw. Dave has new buddies now. This is pretty adorable.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Malachi.
So Malachi has spent the entire weekend growling at Dave and has previously bit his clothing. So that was like the most amazing thing ever.
That is awesome. That is progress. Dave's the dog whisperer. Good job.
And then Annie is over here.
Hi.
Hi, Annie.
Hi, Susie. Love you, Susie.
Love you guys too. Thank you all for working so hard.
Pizza, Eddie.
Eddie is the mooch. Eddie is the mooch.
I love you. I'll pet you.
All right, so
Yep.
now to sweep back around and find my green screen.
I love how everything blue shows up as blue screen when you do that.
It's kind of hilarious. There's
various blue things in the background.
Just disappear.
But it is a room full of awesomeness, as Broken Symmetry says in the chat. Room full of awesome.
Yeah, it's kind of This is my happy place. It's where all the daily space get recorded, where story time gets done. I'm sorry for changing my distance from the mic, folks. And yes, I am wearing snow pants. It's really cold in here. So I'm ready to go skiing.
Snow pants.
I used to pretend I knew how to ski. It's cold. It's so cold, and snow pants are not flattering. It's good. So I will let you escape, and thank you so much for stepping in. And
You're welcome. It's been fun. It's been fun being on stream. So I would dare say you can probably convince me to do it more often now that I have
Yay.
it set up. And, guys, if y'all want to see me more on Daily Space and other things, donate. I would definitely say if we can get it up to $8,000 before the end of tonight, I will definitely tell Pamela to let me do a good 2 or 3 episodes in the next month. For sure.
I will happily give Susie all my Mondays.
Monday. Oh, because I need Mondays. There we go. Mondays are the most fun.
Annie is laughing because of the sheer look of joy. Because if Mondays, all I have to do is write the episode, I
could probably do that. Yeah.
So
if you want to see me once a week, then doing Mondays, get it up to at least $8,000 for the end of the stream tonight, and I will guarantee that.
So, and that should be possible because
that's not too bad.
In the next hour, and it's the braid needs to come out. I've simply reached that point. Some people remove things. I undo my hair. So in the next hour, thank you for the bits, Refs Matt. Thank you for the bits.
There's no food, Eddie.
My hair is now tangled as well. Okay, I feel much better. Feel so much better. So in the next hour, when Philip Metzger is on here, we are going to be doing a $1,000 match, and so we could easily hit 8,000 by the end of the night and give Susie my Mondays.
Hold on. What unlocks at 8,000?
Yep.
Oh, and something unlocks at 8,000. Annie's looking to see what it unlocks at 8,000.
Hair color unlocks at 8,000.
And if we hit 8,000, Annie is going to dye her hair either red or purple and let you pick.
Even more reason to pitch that in because you can mess with me and Annie. So it's a double win there. And in the moderator chat, they're already saying, we're going to hold you to that, Susie. I promise I wouldn't have made the promise on stream if I hadn't been willing to do it.
And we will do a poll. I don't know how to do a poll, but I think other people can figure out how to do a poll. We will do a poll to find out red or purple. So be prepared, people. Be prepared.
And Keeper of Maps asks, why does the hair color have to be an either or? And not both?
Because it's hard to maintain both.
This is true.
Yeah, it's just harder to maintain. You can do it, but Annie's not used to dyeing her hair. So she can transform from one to the next over time. That's a thing. As her roots grow in, slowly add red. I have ideas.
Yes.
I have ideas.
And probably the next time y'all see me, my hair will be colored back again too. I just hadn't done it this year, so you get to see my kind of natural color. So I thought really hard about putting purple in my hair before this weekend, but then I was like, but I'm going to relatives for Christmas, and I'm like, I don't know if it'll turn out good. So yeah, next time I'll have time. I usually color it right before Dragon Con. That's when I put crazy color in my hair. So,
and I simply haven't seen my natural hair color other than when I forgot to dye my hair in years. So last week when we were at Disney and Universal, that was the most natural my hair color had been. And I got to see how much gray I actually have.
Which actually just means the color shows up better when you put it on.
Right. Okay, but we have completely wandered astray of all the things we are meaning to do here. So I'm going to send you Anon and ask, do you want to come back for the last hour and join us in celebration and bring an adult beverage?
I may do that. I will let you know in chat if that works out. It will depend on, and if the people that are having to be quiet in my house riot on me or not, if I ask them. So, but if not, I will definitely be in the chat.
And you can have a firm control over the mute button. We're good with that. All right. So thank you so much, Susie. Please go
Thank you.
enjoy some time off stream.
Gonna go get some food. Yep.
Excellent. All right. We'll see you on the other side.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. So you guys have me for the next 45 minutes, but I have a plan. Yes, you can still donate past the 40 hours. If you look at the goal, it should say some number of days that I no longer remember what is. Our goal is to, if we can, raise the money by December 31st. That is our goal. We will continue raising money until we hit that goal. And this is just how we keep our programs going. If we hit, so we're at 5,000, folks. We are at 5,000. Oh, we hit 5,000. So Walker is eating the chip.
He's downloading Zoom.
So here is the plan. I am going to give the doggos treats. So come here, Malachi. Can you sneak your head on the stream? Whoa. Hi, Eddie. Okay. So Malachi is being delicate, and Eddie doesn't know how to be delicate. My big dumb dog. You're a good boy. Okay. Thump, thump, thump.
Don't knock things over, Eddie. Don't knock things over. Don't knock things over. Eddie, don't go that way. Don't go that way.
So Eddie is currently standing in the middle of all the cables under my desk, and Annie is
Okay,
rescuing him.
There you go.
So at 20,000, I was willing to eat a chip if we didn't make it to 40. But at 5,000, Walker eats a chip of doom. I'm going to run an ad. After I run the ad, I'm going to do a quick reset of the channel. And we will have Annie on stream with Walker for the eating of the chip.
He did this to himself. Don't feel bad.
I have been practicing my evil laugh. All right, so here's an ad for those of you who aren't subscribers. I'm sorry, we need the money. All right, those of you who are subscribers, I truly love you. You are the fabulous humans. Thank you for $4.10 making us a palindrome again. Thank
Eddie, you
you.
don't want the chip.
Eddie's begging. It's what he does. Thank you. I love palindromes. I thank you. I thank you. It is a pleasing number. So thank you all who are subscribing and able to see me right now. You are the lifeblood of what we do. You and our patrons on patreon.com/CosmoQuestX are the folks that each month we rely on to let us figure out what's possible, what we can afford to do, and how we're going to pay all our bills. Eddie is begging for this chip. I have to move because he's edging me out. You see the nose. There we go. So we have completed the ad. I'm now going to do a real fast reboot of the stream. And then Walker will be joining us momentarily. While we wait for Walker to join, I will be turning over the stream to Annie to explain about the chip.